Good afternoon, everybody. Thank God, everybody's alive. This is pretty good. This is pretty good. Brian asked me just earlier on, he said, how do you feel? And I said, I haven't felt as scared in my life since I was 17 years old. Because I come from a totally and utterly different world than you guys. A completely different world. I've been looking it up in dictionaries and Google and everything else just to try to find out what most of you have been speaking about in the first part of the day. And hopefully you won't have to do that when I speak. What I want to be able to do is to turn around and talk to you a little bit about change that happens at a local level, because one of the themes here was an idea, a single idea, can change the world. And I'm going to just share with you a little bit of my experience of what it is really like to be at that cutting edge, to be at the grassroots when it comes to making some changes. Because it's very, very easy to say, and I can sit in my ivory tower in Geneva where I live, and say that Scouts are going to change the world, but really, it isn't all that easy. It's almost like standing up here at 1:30 in the afternoon and talking to a bunch of people like you because I'm really, really scared. But let me go through a little bit. One of the big dangers about change is that change is all about trying to attack or infiltrate or understand or deal with an existing powerful echo chamber. An echo chamber at a community level, an echo chamber in a country, an echo chamber in a faith group. It's not easy when power is like that. And I want to explain a little bit. And by the way, I have to make a couple of apologies. The first apology is that I'm Irish, and I may, from time to time, use a little bit of bad language, so please, I apologize for that. Second is, by the way, I really like Ken when he said earlier on that we're going to have Brexit solved in a year. I really, really want to solve, because it's been going on for 3 years now, and we Irish would really, really benefit from that kind of timeline. It's not that easy. But let me start here. I said I'd be using some bad language, and I'm really, really, really sorry for using the T word. Because before coming here, the most scary time, as I said, when I was 17, and somebody basically came along and said, what the f are you doing here, you take? And grabbed me by my scout scarf, and Greg was talking about getting me into my gear. This is my gear these days. But at the age of 17, I was in a scout scarf with a title called Catholic Boy Scouts of Ireland in the middle of Prosent, Belfast. And somebody grabbed me by the scout scarf and said, what the f are you doing here, you take? And that guy could have killed me that day. The thing that was going through my mind wasn't, he's going to kill me. It was, what the hell is a take? But let me just back up a little bit, because it's really, really important that you understand my echo chamber and echo chambers. And for me to deal with that particular situation, it was really, really important to have this background. And, you know, some people say that elephants bear a grudge, you know, they've got a long memory, but Irish people are elephants on steroids. Because you've really got to go back to the 12th century. And by the way, anybody talking about echo chambers here, you know nothing until you've come to Ireland. Because basically, all of our problems are the English. Every single problem you could possibly ever think of, we blame on the English. And you've got to go back to the 12th century to actually find the roots of that problem. And it isn't really an English problem, it's actually an Irish problem, because an Irish guy who didn't become High King of Ireland invited in the English king to actually help him take over his throne again. But the English guy didn't really stand up to his arrangement and actually took over the country anyway. which is why we trust the English so much. But you really need to look at the map, because the map here shows a couple of arrows. It's irrelevant what it says, because most of these notes are just here for me to remember what I want to say. But the arrows are important, and the arrows show an inflow of planters, of colonialists who came in from Scotland and from England, brought in by the Crown. Irish Catholics were uprooted, kicked out of town. There weren't even any reservations that you might call here. We were just kicked out. And Irish people became tenant farmers, itinerants, and basically got kicked out of town. And so this is the root of an awful lot of problems in Ireland, particularly in Northern Ireland today. And so I think it's important just to keep in mind there, that's over 700 years ago that this started, and 500 years when this plantation started. So when we come to the next point in 1976 in Belfast, again, a little bit along the way, our country was in a mess. You guys had civil rights movement. In Ireland, they started by one man, one vote, and the idea was give votes to Catholics in Northern Ireland because they didn't have votes. So this whole started very peacefully, but as you see, it turned into a lot of messing around, and Ireland was against, or became synonymous with violence, terrorism, anger. And this is the kind of picture that was appearing every single day on the newspapers and the television as we had at the time. And stupidly, there was John Geoghegan sitting in a nice scout hall at the age of 17, looking on what was going on, and said to my friends, you know, lads, I think we could do something about this. I think if we went to Belfast and met up with some Protestant scouts, you know what, I reckon we could do something together. Now, timing and planning hasn't been really one of my great fortes. And my friends aren't really one of my great fortes either, because they all said, that sounds like a great idea. Yeah, you laugh. Okay, you laugh. You laugh. But that's where I met a guy called Billy. And Billy was a Protestant scout. So I end up, sign that says Catholic Boy Scouts of Ireland on my uniform, in the middle of Protestant Belfast. This kind of stuff was going on. And if, depending on which side you look at it, you've got a British Army guy looking that direction. And he's looking at this terrible mob, this horrific mob that's throwing stones at him. If you look from the other side, you see some people who maybe had a peaceful protest. Maybe a British Army guy started shooting rubber bullets. It depends on which side you're on. So remember, echo chambers are very important when you look at this situation here. So along I came, I met up with Billy, and Billy, in a very friendly, scout-like way, grabbed me by the scarf and said, what the are you doing here, you take? And again, he could have killed me that very moment, and I was wondering what take meant. The issue for me was, am I going to be killed as well? And just to let you know, he didn't kill me, just in case you were wondering about it and worried, just to get rid of the tension, because a friend of ours came along and he said, listen, Billy, leave him alone. This is John. He's here to meet you, you daft tick. Because this is going to be basically a tale of two echo chambers, John's and Billy's. And one of the things that, we've missed it. One of the things that's important here is what John and Billy ended up being able to build together. Because if you actually take a look at what we did, we started a program over 10 years of youth exchange between North and South of Ireland. There was 120,000 scouts involved. You add on a couple of parents, a couple of siblings, one or two friends, and you end up influencing about 20% of the Irish population. 20% of the Irish population who have never met a Catholic if they're Protestant, or a Protestant if you're Catholic. The difference that made to the peace process in Northern Ireland is absolutely huge and absolutely massive. But the only way we were able to do that was to enter into the other person's echo chamber, to try to understand what was going on, and for a Taig to talk to Billy. And I'm not being very, very nice to Billy these days, because he is a really good guy. And I'm bit kind of criticizing him and sort of saying that he comes from this echo chamber because he did. He was one of those guys who came over from Scotland. But he did that 500 years ago. His family has been there for 500 years. He was in power. He was right to think that I was invading his space. But at the end of the day, I was invading his space. I was only a worthless take. From my point of view, I came along with my own echo chamber, and here I got introduced two people, Con McGinn and Tommy Geoghegan. Con McGinn, now I have to do a little parenthesis here, because in our country we have things called Republicans. And Republicans in our country can either be as good as some people think the Republicans here are, or as bad as some people think the Republicans here are. So please, I'm not talking about your kind of Republicans, okay? So my grandfather was an Irish Republican Brotherhood member, which means he was, from the British point of view, a terrorist, from the Irish point of view, a freedom fighter. He was burned out of his house at the age of 5 from Northern Ireland, came down with his parents, and he took part in a revolution in 1916 and the Irish Civil War, or War of Independence in 21. On the other side of things, my other grandfather was Tommy Geoghegan. Tommy Geoghegan was a member of the Royal Irish Constabulary. He was paid by the Queen, or the King at the time, believed in the Queen right to his death, and he would have been Billy's best friend. But my echo chamber was made up of parents from both sides who basically told me that you can actually make peace, you can have a chat. And by the way, nobody's ever going to hate you. And by the way, when I actually did meet Billy, and I went through that, it was the best lesson ever. Simply the best lesson ever. 1990, I became the Secretary General of Red Cross and Red Crescent Youth in the world. We had about 20 million volunteers all around the world. Most of my predecessors had gone to very, very nice UN meetings, having a great time. I came along into the job, and funny enough, Eastern Europe started falling apart. We had a HIV epidemic, and there was a little matter of Tiananmen Square, and things were changing in China. Just let me tell you about two Billies that I met. Two Billies from East Germany. We were at a youth event we organized in Austria. We went along to a memorial for a concentration camp. These two young women from a town in East Germany were looking aghast at this map on the wall. And I said, what's the problem? And they were looking on the wall, that's wrong. So what do you mean that's wrong? That map is wrong, because it says there was a concentration camp, a Nazi concentration camp in our town. It never happened, that wasn't true. They lived in an echo chamber. You know, fake news wasn't invented by somebody called Conway. The Eastern German government did a really, really good job at fake news. They wiped history. They were Billy and Billy. They created a completely different image. We had a lot of work to do with young people from Eastern and Central Europe. And in fact, over a couple of years, we managed to change an awful lot of attitudes and bring in leadership, bring in values, bring in things that people had wiped away from their whole value base and their whole agenda over years and years and years of communism. One of the things I did after that was to take over the European operations of the Red Cross, Red Crescent. I ended up in Bosnia during this horrific war, and I met another Billy. This time he was Catholic. He was a Catholic Croat in Mostar. My job was to try to bring the different parts of the Bosnian Red Cross together, just like they were bringing different parts of the country together. But this guy, this Catholic Croat, we can call him Billy now, because he was in power. He had his own echo chamber. He had the right to be there. And the Muslim guys who were trying to get equal parity and so on, they could have been John, they could have been Takes. They had a tough time. But experience in Northern Ireland actually brought it to fruition. We made a change. I did a lot of work in Vietnam with the Red Cross after that. And just like my timing and my planning in some of my decisions in Belfast were absolutely timed perfectly, so was a change to my career. I joined the World Scout Foundation, and my start date was 11th of September 2001, known to you as 9/11. It didn't just change airport security and lots of other things. It changed locked down completely global fundraising for our kind of cause. Things just froze. And I was going around saying, okay, what are we going to do now? Well, I just happened to go to Riyadh in November that year. And in Riyadh, I met this man here. He was then Crown Prince. He became King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia. And he made a speech to a scout group, and I was very, very interested in hearing this. He said, I'm really worried about the way the world is going today. Peoples of the world are moving apart. To be Saudi today, and to be Muslim, equal to be terrorist. And he said, that's not who we are. We're a different kind of people. So I went up to him afterwards and I said, listen, it used to be Irish and Catholic used to be terrorist, and I've got an idea. Because in his speech he said, you guys with all of your global network, you should be messengers of peace. So I said, I reckon that we can actually make a difference there. And so all I had to do was persuade him it was a good idea to invest in it. All I had to do then was to take Carlson's best friend, the King of Sweden, who was my boss, to persuade him to join it, because again, these are two very, very big political leaders from West and East. To persuade half the world that the Saudis were actually serious about peace and they weren't terrorists, and the other half of the world, in the Muslim world, to turn around and say an idea that's going to be led also from the West is quite serious. Because remember, this time was quite difficult. Well, the results are very clear. If anybody can recognize this wheel, it's the Sustainable Development Goals, otherwise known as the World's Plan in the United Nations for changing the world. 17 goals, all basically designed to deal with one or other problem. It could be water, it could be environment, it could be women's issues, you name it. The 1.2 million figure, we invested in a number of things for this Messenger of Peace program. We started an online registration system in 2012. By today, the figure of hours of service completed as messengers of peace by scouts around the world, these are community services that are contributing to different programs, is 1.2 billion hours of service. 1.2 billion hours of service. Recognized last year by the United Nations at the General Assembly as the largest single contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals by any organization in the world. All because we took one idea from one guy called King Abdullah. We said, you be a messenger of peace, go into your community, find out what the problem is and solve it. And when you overlay the problems that were identified at a local level by young people against the Sustainable Development Goals, all 17 of those goals are covered, and they're covered in spades. And what's this got to do with you? I mean, why the hell am I here? And what's this thing about TAIG? Well, let me tell you, TAIG is a rather nasty word for Catholic. It comes from the name Taig, and it's as bad as the N word here. It's a really, really bad word. And that's an acceptable word for somebody who's down there. So what's a TAIG, in my opinion? A TAIG is John going up to Belfast and saying, well, we can do something. I know I threatened somebody's space, but we try to make a difference. A TAIG is the people who dealt with the two Billies from Eastern Germany and persuaded them otherwise. A TAIG is that Muslim person in Mostar. A TAIG is probably King Abdullah trying to stand up for the name and reputation of an entire religion. And a TAIG is a 28 million young scouts who've gone online and said, this is what I've done to change the world as a messenger of peace. It's any person in a local community who wants to make a difference. And by the way, there's a lot of them around. So that's what a TAIG is, but why the hell am I here? Well, none of this would have been possible, none of it, if it wasn't for technology, if it wasn't for social media. Because basically we invested in three things: inspire, enable, deliver. The inspire part was going online and helping young people to go online and tell their story to other young people. That was never possible before in the Scout movement. We have 1.5 million local groups who are isolated, ran their own show, which is the right way and has to happen, but they were isolated. Social media helped us bring all those people together from 2012 on. The enable part was capacity building. You can't turn around and let John Geoghegan go up on his own in 1976, and certainly not 2019, into Belfast. You've got to help him and train him. You've got to have a competent training program, education program, a competent structure standing behind him. That's what we've invested in. And by the way, we brought in a company called SGS, which is a global standards company. And that company has helped us collect an awful lot of data, and that has completely changed the services that the World Scout Organization gives to scout groups around the world. Using data makes a difference. And of course, by young people going online, we're able to turn around and add up all their impact. So basically, people in the UN are saying, how the hell did the Scouts do that? And the other part was deliver. We've actually helped young people around the world. We've been able to focus a lot of programs on getting to them. Why am I here? 1.2 billion hours of service is the largest single contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals. I think Scouting is way, way, way underperforming. We could be doing an awful lot more. We've been able to reach out to 28 million young people. There are 54 million young people in the Scouts today, and there could be more. We should be able to reach them. 500 million is the number of alumni that we have alive today. People have had a good experience in the Scouts over the years. Most of those are in different companies. They're in different NGOs. Imagine if we were able to reach out to them as well. Why am I here? Because basically I think we've underperformed. We've scratched the surface as far as technology is concerned, as far as data is concerned, and everything that you smart people have been talking about. We need the sway minds to come in and look at us like a venture capitalist would. We need companies like you to come in and do this. We need the guys talking about satellites to help the Scouts from 25 countries are doing really, really important work with the Red Cross and Red Crescent on disaster relief. The only agency in Haiti that was working after the earthquake were 56,000 Scouts who were out on the streets without any mobile phones because they weren't working, because they put on the uniforms and they said, we've got to do it. Imagine what we can do now if we train those people better, equip those people better, make things happen. You know, here in the room, you got to listen to Chris Lee from K-pop, because one of the things that Carl has been able to manage to do is to put us together. He's got millions and millions of young people around the world who are looking at K-pop and dancing along to that. We need them. We can also help in the Philippines, a couple of million in Bangladesh. We have a lot of good people. There's lots of great stories about Scouts. There's a lot of good things happening. What's really, really important is you've got great ideas, and it's a fantastic thing to turn around and say, you can make a difference with one idea. Whether it's a supply chain or whether it's a customer, at the ground level, if you want to make real significant change, it's scary. To be a TAIG is a frightening thing to be. Sometimes it could just be looking awkward in front of a group of people. A lot of times, your life can be threatened. And I know a lot of people in Rwanda, Burundi, who've worked for the Scouts, 30,000 peace educators, and they had to do that underground, hidden, because their lives were threatened. It's not that easy to be a TAIG. It's really, really important to be a TAIG. If you want to sway minds, you've got to support those TAIGs. We've done a certain amount. I'd really, really love to see that you would get involved, help, support, criticize us, give us some ideas, talk to Carl, talk to some of the former Scouts, Brian, in this room, and actually help us to make a difference. Swaying minds is interesting. Swaying minds is easy. But are you a TAIG? Are you a Billy? Can you help us? That's it, folks. Thank you very much.